we are looking at Deuteronomy chapter 24. And if you remember from our last lesson, that we had a situation where we were just dealing with things that you should and should not do. Kind of just basic everyday lifestyle awareness. And this is going on, continuing in this chapter. There are some things that we should be mindful of because they bring out attitudes and principles. Now, today, what it's going to be focusing on is people that have the ability to take advantage of other people. Right? And our society is built like that. We got a lot of things that we put in place, and they turn out to be situations in which advantage can be taken, abuses can happen. You look at government. Government is supposed to be there to help the people, but it turns into situations where it actually can sometimes oppress the people. We look at situations of marriage where the marriage is supposed to be there, especially from the view of how God sees it, where the husband marries a wife, and the protection responsibility is supposed to be given by the husband. The husband is supposed to protect his wife. And there's so many other different things between parents and children, and then you even get into those that have authority not because of relationship, but have authority because of position. So sometimes you got people that have that have jobs to offer, but only want to offer it to certain people. Sometimes you got people that have jobs to offer, but don't want to pay somebody a living wage. And so there's so many different ways in which advantage can be abused. And this chapter is going to highlight some of that. So that's the connection that I kind of see from all of these different descriptions that we see here. But there are a few outliers that I think I want to point out, but I still think it lies within that same principle. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get the reading in, and then we'll check out how these connect going forward. So let's take a listen. Deuteronomy chapter 24.
Chapter 24.
When a man hath taken a wife and married her, and it come to pass that she find no favor in his eyes, because he hath found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorcement, and give it in her hand, and send her out of his house. And when she is departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's wife. And if the latter husband hate her, and write her a bill of divorcement, and giveth it in her hand, and sendeth her out of his house, or if the latter husband die, which took her to be his wife, her former husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife. After that she is defiled. For that is abomination before the Lord, and thou shalt not cause the land to sin, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. When a man hath taken a new wife, he shall not go out to war, neither shall he be charged with any business, but he shall be free at home 1 year, and shall cheer up his wife which he hath taken. No man shall take the nether or the upper millstone to pledge, for he taketh a man's life to pledge. If a man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him, or selleth him, then that thief shall die, and thou shalt put evil away from among you. Take heed in the plague of leprosy, that thou observe diligently, and do according to all that the priests the Levites shall teach you. As I commanded them, so ye shall observe to do. Remember what the Lord thy God did unto Miriam by the way, after that ye were come forth out of Egypt. When thou dost lend thy brother anything, thou shalt not go into his house to fetch his pledge. Thou shalt stand abroad, and the man to whom thou dost lend shall bring out the pledge abroad unto thee. And if the man be poor, thou shalt not sleep with his pledge. In any case thou shalt deliver him the pledge again when the sun goeth down, that he may sleep in his own raiment, and bless thee, and it shall be righteousness unto thee before the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not oppress an hired servant that is poor and needy, whether he be of thy brethren, or of thy strangers that are in thy land within thy gates. At his day thou shalt give him his hire, neither shall the sun go down upon it, for he is poor, and setteth his heart upon it, lest he cry against thee unto the Lord, and it be sin unto thee. The fathers shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. Thou shalt not pervert the judgment of the stranger, nor of the fatherless, nor take a widow's raiment to pledge. But thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in Egypt, and the Lord thy God redeemed thee thence. Therefore I command thee to do this thing. When thou cuttest down thine harvest in thy field, and hast forgot a sheaf in the field, thou shalt not go again to fetch it. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all the work of thine hands. When thou beatest thine olive tree, thou shalt not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. When thou gatherest the grapes of thy vineyards, thou shalt not glean it afterward. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in the land of Egypt. Therefore I command thee to do this thing.
All right, here we go. Now, as you can see, as I stated in my preliminary remarks, that there's a lot in this chapter about someone that has power over another person, not mistreating the person that is powerless. And you see that, kind of obvious here. You see all of these different situations in which an individual can be easily mistreated. Now, in that, once again, we see here that these are Old Testament ritual commandments. I have to always emphasize, the Old Testament is a very good book for understanding principles and analogies and metaphors and allegories. These are all in here. We don't any longer live by the Mosaic law. It was fulfilled by Jesus, and now Jesus says, you have heard of old, but I tell you. So he's given us a new commandment. We follow the life of Jesus. And Jesus then gives us righteousness that is equivalent to if we had actually ourselves fulfilled the Mosaic law. We have not done it ourselves individually. We have achieved it by receiving a gift. So there are things in here that sometimes people want to read in this chapter and in many other chapters, and they want to take it as actuality and as current. And then they want to go out and do things like, treating other people bad by who they are or where they live, or taking people and causing them to be stoned because they'll quote out and say, oh, the Bible calls it an abomination. And so you got to keep that stuff in mind. Keep in mind, one of that word abomination is going to show up in here too. So we want to also make sure that we're not overemphasizing, but yet at the same time, I don't want us to lose the principle. There is a principle in the lessons, but what we're not supposed to do is go out and stone people to death. So we got to keep that in mind. So I always like to bring that out for us that are living now and going through the scripture and realizing that it has been fulfilled by Jesus. Jesus said himself, the scripture was written about him. Now, with that little caveat stated, let's go and take a look at what we got here. Chapter 24, going back to verse 1, and it says, when a man taketh a wife and marry her. Okay, so we're starting off with a good thing, right? Marriage is honorable. Marriage is good. That's one of those things that we should celebrate. And there are celebrations for marriage when you find companionship and love and all that kind of good stuff. However, guess what? It don't always turn out that way, do it? There's a whole lot of times where marriage that's supposed to be a wonderful and blessed celebration turns into nightmares or problems or lifelong issues. Right? Why? Because that's the way we are as human beings. We bring sin into everything we go into. The institution of marriage is a perfect institution instituted by God. But it's being fulfilled by imperfect people. So it's going to have problems. Thank God for Jesus. But Jesus addresses it. I should say the Word of God addresses it here in these writings of Moses. And it says, when a man taketh a wife and marries her. But here's the and, the connective piece. And, let's see, Cheryl's trying to get in. And it come to pass. Well, what happened? What came to pass? Well, something happened. Some problems, some issues, some circumstances. It came to pass that she find no favor in his eyes, because he have found some uncleanness in her. Then let him write a bill of divorcement and give it to her, and send her out of his house. Now, this is a situation that, if you look in Matthew chapter 19, the Pharisees brought this issue up to Jesus. Why did Moses give us a bill of divorcement? And Jesus answered that question. He said it was done because of the hardness of your heart, which is what I just said. You go into a wonderful institution, but you bring in all your sin and your baggage and all of your troubles with you. And you refuse to believe that the problem is yours. It's always somebody else. I'm never the person that's causing my own issue. No, it's this person. It's that person. I did everything I could. I couldn't have done no better. We got to be careful with that. Everybody brings something. Everybody brings issues. And so when this husband married this woman and he found what? Some uncleanness in her. Well, what did he think was going to be? She was going to be perfect. She was going to have no issues. That she was going to have no problems. She's going to have issues. Guess what? Marriage is a metaphor of our relationship with Jesus. What is the believer called metaphorically? We are called who? The bride of Christ. Well, so Jesus marries us. Suppose Jesus looks in us and sees some uncleanness in us. Thank God he doesn't do this. What he does is he redeems us. He perfects us. He continuously renews us. So when we look at this, that's why Jesus said this was because of the hardness of your heart. That speaking to the Pharisees, when they questioned him about divorce, that divorce was allowed, so that the abuse won't continue to get worse. Because when people start abusing, they don't abuse and say, you know what, I abuse this person, I'm going to stop, I'm going to get better. No, the abuse continues. So what the Lord does is he allows you to cut the cord to the abuse and move on. Let's continue reading. Deuteronomy chapter 24, we did verse 1, let's go to verse 2. And when she is departed out of his house, look at this, she may go and marry another man's wife. So she may go and be another man's wife. So what does that mean? She's not trapped in that situation, because this person that married her first recognized she ain't perfect. She's got some uncleanness in her. Well, I guarantee you that so did the man. But in this particular situation, and in that day, who had the authority? The man. So the woman could see all the problems she wanted in the man, and she had very little or almost no opportunity to divorce. And if she did divorce, she didn't have any right to take. It ain't like how today's situation is, where if you get a divorce, the court see, okay, well, y'all built stuff together. The man gets half, the woman gets half. Those types of philosophy didn't apply then. So she leaves, and now she can become another man's wife. All right? And so that's open for an option for her. All right? Now, look at verse 3. And if the latter husband hate her and write her a bill of divorcement and give it to her hand and send her out of his house, or if the latter husband die, which took her to be his wife. Look at verse 4. It says, the former husband which sent her away may not take her again to be his wife after she is defiled. For it is abomination before the Lord. And thou shalt not cause the land to sin, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. Now, let's see if we can bundle all this together. What are we looking at here? All right, so we already talked about the marriage and how it's supposed to be a good situation. And we also talked about the marriage as being a perfect institution instituted by God, which because of sin, imperfect individuals come in to it. So the marriage is never gonna be perfect. Why? Because you got imperfect people producing it, and you're gonna have problems. And so each one will always seem to find some manner of uncleanness in the other person. There's something that you ain't doing correct. There's something that they ain't doing correct, and it's always it's always easy to see other people's situations. Well, in this type of situation here, we're dealing with a reckoning of doing things just because I have the power to do it. I can divorce anybody I want, and I'm going to do it. And if I don't want this person, I'll get rid of him. And then if I see that the other person didn't want him, then I'll bring her back. Well, what is the problem with that? Why does the Lord call it abomination? Because he recognizes the people that are playing the game are sinful, and they will play games. God will not allow you to turn marriage into a realm of wife swapping. That's what the Pharisees in Jesus' day did. They would divorce a person. Jesus brought out to them about the concept of lust, and he talked about them about that. And the Pharisees, were quickly pointing out, well, we weren't born of fornication. But what Jesus was actually trying to point out about the Pharisees was that they turned marriage into a game of their own pleasure. So they would marry a person, and if they didn't like it, found some uncleanness, they would divorce the person. And then they would just be like, okay, well, actually, let me go back. They wouldn't see a uncleanness yet. They would marry the person, be the wife, but then they would see another woman that they liked and wanted to marry. And then they would say, oh, well, you know what? I'm already married, but I want to be with this person. So I'm going to divorce this person because I'm going to find some uncleanness, which is always easy to do. Why? Because everybody's got uncleanness. And then I will marry the next person. But then they would continue that process. And it turned into a game that they could play. And why could they play it? Because they had the authority to do so. Be very aware and very careful about your ability to just do something because you have the power and authority to do it. If you own something, if you're a boss, if you are a manager or an executive or somebody that's hired somebody to do something, you can't just treat anybody any kind of way just because, well, I'm paying you to do it. I can say what I want to say to you, or I can do what I want to do. You have to be very careful. So the institution of marriage, especially in that day, was a situation where it was made for the husband to be a protector to the wife. Before the husband, who was the protector of that woman? It was the father. And so you see this theme coming in, which is really complicated. It's really got a lot of different variables to it. But what the Lord is pointing out here is that don't turn this institution into a game to play to satisfy your own lust and your own desires and your own greed. God's not playing that game. All right? And he points it out because he says, if you begin to play that game, it will be an abomination, and the evidence of it is that the sin will come upon the land. The land will be corrupted. And that's always something to keep in mind when you read scripture and you see that it talks about how the land will become corrupted. Because then it speaks about you're going against nature. You're going against the things of which God has outlined and has provided. And if those things happen, natural circumstances and natural situations will rise up and will cause problems and difficulties. We see that even with the land of Sodom and Gomorrah. That was another one where the land was corrupt. But let's keep going. We got some more yet to talk about marriage. So let's move along. Verse 5. When a man taketh a new wife, he shall not go out to war, neither shall he be charged with any business, but he shall be free at home 1 year, and shall cheer up his wife, which he have taken. Boy, that's one of those laws I could go with that.
I want my year.
Like a lot of wives say, I want my year. I want my year to start now. All right, and that makes sense in a sense, especially when you look at from the situations that they had back in the day. Now, how does this apply? How do we look at this? It still speaks to the concept of marriage. Don't turn the situation of marriage where, well, you know what, I'm marrying this wife, and what's the word I'm looking for? It emphasizes that the man is supposed to do what? Cheer up his wife. All right, and so that's an important concept. So I'm not going to just marry you and then leave you and go on and be away for a year or two and come back. No, if you married the person, you got to show due diligence as to why you married, because I care for you. So you just don't be gathering a wife and you're like, well, you're going to be my wife and I go home and I'll see you when I get back. Once again, it's not that type of relationship. Some people may have the ability to do that. Why? Because they're doing all kinds of other things. Some people may have other wives in other towns. I'm gonna marry you. You stay here in this town. I'm going to this other town. God's not allowing us to play that game. And by no means am I exhausting all of the scenarios and all of the possibilities. The mind has an exhaustive ability for creativity when it comes to manipulation, sinful activity, and taking advantage. We can create all kinds of ways of doing it. And we do that, unfortunately. Not just in marriage, but in all kinds of aspects in which we have authority and power over another person or another situation. Let's keep going because we're going to see some of these other situations of authority and power. All right? All right, so he gave us 5 verses about the whole concept about marriage, which I think is important because we still see that even in today's society. That's a very complex and very it's a very situation in which confusion can just thrive. All right, but let's keep going. Verse 6. No man shall take to thy nearer or upper millstone to pledge, for he taketh a man's life to pledge. Now, let's give some history behind this. The millstone is a way in which you would go out into the harvest and you would grab, your grain, and in order to turn it into, the flour or the meal of the day, you have to grind it. So you would use these millstones, and there was a stone on the bottom, and you had this other stone on top. A lot of times it was a circular stone, and you would spin it around, and it would grind the grain into a fine powder, which you can then knead together and make the various types of breads and various other types of food that they would use. And so what it says is that no man shall take the nearer or upper millstone as a pledge. So when somebody owes you something, what should you not do? Don't take the means in which he's able to feed himself. Don't basically, if we bring in today's kitchen and today's day, don't take the man's kitchen. Don't take his stove and refrigerator. Well, you owe me something, and I'm going to take your stove and your refrigerator and and your sink. No, don't take the things that allow him to be able to satisfy his own hunger. Right? Find something else that you can allow him to pledge with. So never take that which will cripple a man to be able to feed himself. Now we're going to see that theme continue through a lot of the rest of these that we see here. All right, so don't why can't I take what I want? He owes me some money, and I see the only thing, if I take his millstone, I know he'll pay back. No, don't put a person under that kind of stress. If I don't pay it back, I don't eat. All right, that's not the kind of way that you want to do it. In today's society, we're not going to take his millstone. We take everything. All right, don't pay anybody. When you're living in a house or a mortgage, they take everything. put you out. Our society is very unforgiving and has no concept of, well, I still want you to be able to survive. They don't care about whether you survive or not. That's not their problem, is what they would say. But let's keep going. Verse 7. If a man be found stealing any of his brethren or the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him, or selleth him, then that thief shall die, and that thou might put evil away from among you. Now I'm gonna read this again. All right, so take a look. All right, if a man be found stealing any of his brother of the children of Israel, all right, so to children stealing brothers. Well, what about if you're stealing from another country? Well,
Trafficking is illegal.
That's right. All right. What about stealing from another land? What about stealing from another state? What about stealing from another ethnic group? It's wrong. And doing what? Maketh what? Merchandise. He or she is my what? Property. What does that sound like to you?
Slavery.
Sounds
How
like
I got here.
it sounds like slavery. That's how we got here. Exactly. And you're doing that for what purpose? Because I have what kind of labor? Basically free labor. And what does God say about this? When you're doing that, he calls it what? He calls it stealing. And then he says, look, he says, then that thief shall die. Now, once again, I said, we're not going to go out and say, well, your ancestors stole me away, and now, the death penalty is upon you, because we're going to see here in a minute that we shouldn't do that. And I'll point that out when we get to it. But the concept and the principle is still the same. Don't steal people because you have the authority. And what was the authority? Well, I have greater technology. I have a gun. And you got bow and arrows. Okay? So I can shoot you if you don't do what I tell you to do. I'll shoot you and your family, your children, your mama, everybody. I'll shoot you. So you do what I tell you to do. And I got chains and irons, and I can, manipulate you. So I'm going to do it, and I turn you into property. And I'll sell you to who I want to sell. Oh. So I can get rid of you if I want to get rid of you. Just like how a husband could get rid of a wife if he wanted to get rid of her. So you see the connection? One is certainly more brutal than the other, but they're both wrong. Right? And once again, he says, don't do this, because then you put away the evil. What does that once again speak of? You don't give Satan an ability to thrive. Satan likes to dwell in that. It's like the other one says, when you do this stuff, you're purging out the evil from the land. You don't allow evil to come into the land. And when evil is in the land, what is it basically saying is that Satan has a stronghold in that area. And you don't want him to have that. And you don't want the evil to thrive in the institutions and the industries that you're doing. So stealing another person and making a slave out of him opens the door for Satan to have a stronghold. And those are the things we're trying to avoid. And that's the principle. You say, well, why is this important? Because we're fighting spiritual battles. And if you just read this and think of it as only natural, well, when you're married, and everybody wants to become legalistic about, well, what does the Bible say legally you're supposed to do about here? It's the principle behind it. It's the spirit behind it that we have to pay attention to. Because we're trying to fight against Satan and his spiritual evil ways that he can come in and corrupt. If we allow certain things to go on, he will then emphasize and exacerbate and just make it even worse than what you had intended it to be. All right, but let's keep going. Look at verse 8. Take heed to the plague of leprosy. Now, in Scripture, the plague of leprosy is always typed as what? It's typed as what? Sin. So he says, always take heed to the plague of leprosy. Pay attention to these things that the lepers can bring into the environment. And that's one of those unfortunate situations where a person has a disease And that disease is highly contagious. So when something is highly contagious, what this is saying, let me read the full verse now that I made that statement. Take heed in the plague of leprosy, that thou observe diligently to do according to all that the priests, the Levites, shall teach you. So they're going to teach you about how to find leprosy in the body. And it was a whole ritual of things that they had to do and what they looked for in order to identify if a person was leprous or not. It says, as I command them, so ye shall observe to do. Look at verse 9. Remember what the Lord thy God did unto Miriam by the way, after that ye were come out of the land of Egypt. Now, that story of Miriam is a very, I think, important story to connect to the concept of leprosy. Once again, leprosy is always typed as sin. And when you had leprosy, what were you supposed to do? You were supposed to stay separate because it was highly contagious. Okay, and we get that. Okay, we're going to always look for it. If we happen to see it, we're going to identify it. We're going to try to keep the person that is diseased, and this is a natural disease, okay, and keep them away because it's contagious. But then he brings in this story about Miriam. Well, what happened with Miriam? Well, Miriam was the one, that's Moses' sister. And when Moses married the Ethiopian woman, Miriam complained. Miriam was like, I don't see why you should be marrying her. And people have to remember, Moses married a woman of Ethiopian descent. And Miriam complained. And what did God do? He turned Miriam's skin into leprosy. Now, it's an ironic situation because Miriam was complaining about whom Moses married because of the color of her skin being too dark. And Miriam's skin was turned too light. So leprosy takes all pigment away. You have no pigment. The skin is just ashy white. And so you say, well, let's connect this together. What is this saying here? Is that leprosy, once again, is a type of sin. But so is what we just got finished talking about, looking at people as slaves or less than, taking advantage. So what Miriam was saying, once again, leprosy is a type of sin, and she's looking at Moses' wife as though, you are not at my level, and I'm going to use my authority to complain about your ability to be in our clan or be part of my brother's inner circle. And she found all this complaining to do based on the nationality of who she was. And it connects leprosy, the natural, to leprosy, the spiritual. Because leprosy is a natural disease. It's called Hansen's disease today, but it's still around. It's still a disease that people can come across, and it can be the symptoms can be treated, but it still cannot be cured. Now, you still have it, but you don't have the symptoms, and it won't be contagious like that. The symptoms won't be around, but you won't get cured of it. It never is removed from your body. Excuse me. But so is the sinful ways and the sinful thoughts that we have. You can be nice to a lot of people, but that don't take away that you are a what? A sinner. Sinner is still, you are still a sinner. What was the only thing that actually totally removed leprosy? Jesus. And what's the only thing that can totally remove our disdain for another person based upon their status in life? Jesus. So I see the connection there. Some like, well, Wayne, that's a stretch. Well, a lot of the scripture is a stretch. The scripture is not always easy to be interpreted. It's not always easy. But if you want to dig, it's there. Right? And I guarantee you, I absolutely guarantee you, that what I am presenting is not all of it. I guarantee there's more connections that I haven't even found. And you may see some other ones. And the ones that you see are not all of them. That's how deep and powerful the Word of God is. If you get into it, you will not be disappointed by what you discover. It will be a blessing to you. if you allow it to speak to you. And it will show you revelation, and will show you insights. And sometimes it'll show you things that only you can understand, and you'll try to sometimes explain it to somebody else, and they look at you like you got two heads. And you're like, well, okay, I'm not explaining it the way I understand it. And that happens to a lot of times, to people a lot of times. All right, but I think it's important to recognize that it's one of those situations where the leprosy is bad naturally, but it's worse spiritually. You don't want to have that kind of disdain for individuals being able to take advantage or not allow a person to have something because you think they don't deserve it because of who they are or where they come from, or you think you're better than them. All right, and so that's a bad situation. Unfortunately, our planet is full of that. I'm better than this person because of where I was born. I don't like this group of people. I don't like this race of people. I don't like this kind of people. We are just inundated with that kind of philosophy and that kind of thinking all the time in our world today. All right, and it's important that we try not to allow that to continue. But let's keep going. Verse 10. When thou dost lend thy brother anything, thou shalt not go into his house to fetch it. All right, to fetch his pledge. All right, so you lend him something. You don't just walk in his house and get that which you lend. I mean, to get the pledge. All right. He says, okay, if you lend me this, I'll pledge this item to you. You don't walk in his house and just take it. What are you supposed to do? Thou shalt stand abroad, and the man to whom thou dost lend shall bring out the pledge abroad unto thee. So you allow him to bring it out to you. So you don't, just because, once again, I'm helping you, I got the authority, I'm going to go in and get what I want. No. You still treat him with what? Dignity. Now, he may be borrowing from you. He's lending, and he's got to give you a pledge. But that doesn't make you his authority. You just can't overwhelm him and take what you want because you happen to have an upper hand in life, financially, over merchandise. Unfortunately, that is not something that we really practice today. People come in. I mean, how many people have their cars repossessed? They just walk into that property. I'm gonna take your car. They go in. You know, I'm coming in. I'm repossessing your refrigerator because you didn't pay the bill. And I get it. I know how our society is. And somebody would say, well, what should you do, Wayne? I mean, some people would take advantage of that, and you are absolutely correct. Why? Because there's no monopoly on not trying to take advantage. Rich people will try to do what? Take advantage. And so will poor people. If poor people know I can get this, and as the law said, if I take it, you can't come back and get it, they would go in and take stuff all day long and just, I ain't paying. I just took it, I ain't paying, and you can't come get it. So the law is not supposed to be to the point where it's trying to get you to understand how you can take the law and manipulate it and take advantage of another group. Unfortunately, that's what people do. That's what the Pharisees did. What the law is trying to do is to help you to see the principle behind it. Don't misuse authority. Authority comes from who? From God. Remember, God told Pilate, Jesus told Pilate, when Pilate said, I have the authority to free you or have you crucified. And Jesus told him, you don't have any authority except for that which was given to you by God. So when you are given authority, don't misuse it. That's the principle. Okay? Verse, where are we at? Verse 11? Verse 11. Thou shalt, no, we did that. Verse 12. And if the man be poor, thou shalt not sleep with his pledge. All right, so he's got a pledge. The man is poor, and it comes towards the evening. What do? You give him his pledge back. And the scripture is filled with situations like that. Even when it came down to the land, if you sold some of the land during the year of Jubilee, you were supposed to give the land back. You don't just take a person's stuff and hold it for, an eternity. You're not going to hold it forever. You're going to hold it, and then you give it back when you recognize, well, he's probably going to need this now. Let me give it back to him. But that's the pledge. Well, I'm just going to believe that it's going to work out. But we don't do that today. And for good reason. Because people will do what? People will take advantage. Why? Because you give them any law, write anything on the book, what's the first thing they're looking for? What's the loophole? Right? Right? That's what, remember that, the debate, that's what Donald Trump said. He said, all these tax laws that I take advantage of that cause me to not pay taxes, he goes, I'm just following the tax law. He found all the what? All the loopholes. And so therefore he said, I don't have to pay. And he said, if you want me to pay, change the tax laws. That's one of the first right things that he said that I can remember. Change the tax laws. But he said, but they won't. Why? Because they take advantage of the same loopholes that I take advantage of. And they put the burden on the middle class and those that are trying to struggle every day. So we know people will take advantage of stuff and do things regardless. So it's not a situation where I'm going to go in here and find out how can I manipulate to get my advantage. If you don't see the principle in here, then you're studying this for no reason. You're looking at it for your own self-serving purposes. Try to find a principle that you want to live by. But see, the thing is, you have to want a principle. You got to want something. You have to want some kind of dignity. You have to want some kind of godly behavior to exist in you to even look for that. Otherwise, the only thing you're looking for is how can I take advantage of this? Let's keep going. It says, in any case, thou shalt deliver him the pledge again when the sun goes down, that he may sleep in his own raiment. Right? So you allow him to have what he is supposed to have so that he was not uncomfortable. We don't do this today. And bless thee. See? So if you give it back to him, what? He would do what? He would bless you. Right? But look what it goes on to say. And bless thee, and it shall be righteousness unto thee before the Lord thy God. Now, that's the important part there. Did you see this? So if you say, I have full authority to take advantage of this individual, and he has no authority, and he's poor, but you know what? I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to give it to him. Then you get two blessings. The person that knows, man, you did not have to do that. But thank God you did. You got blessed by that individual. But who else did you get blessed by? You got blessed by, it shall be righteousness unto you before the Lord thy God. The Lord will account it as righteousness. But see, now, here's the beautiful thing about it, is that he does it anyway for us. It's accounted for righteousness because we do what? Because we brought our neighbor's pledge back to him? Well, that would be accounted righteousness. But our righteousness that we have now is on the account of who? Jesus. So, but what the Lord is saying is you would then be practicing that which Jesus will give you. Right? It's nothing wrong with allowing the practices of the Lord to become part of your everyday activity. I want to do what I feel God is giving. And those are things that oftentimes we don't try to do. We're always looking for advantage. How can I take advantage of my money? I'm looking for loopholes. I'm going through the law. I'm going through all this stuff. I'm going through this contract. I'm looking for loopholes. And what do I want a loophole for? So I can take advantage of it. All right, let's keep going. Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 14. Thou shalt not oppress any hired servant that is poor. Oh, once again, where's the authority? You hired somebody. All right, he's now your worker. And guess what? He's also poor. So he needs the job. All right? And so what does thou shalt not oppress? Well, what does oppress mean? I want you to come and do this work, but I'm not paying you some real money. I'm going to pay you what I want to pay you. And whether you got enough money to eat is not my problem. And he needs the money, so you pay whatever you want. So sometimes we look at situations where people are saying, well, we need to pay people a better wage. I think about stuff like this where, do they take in consideration that, yes, there are people that are trying to make a living off the money that they make spending, 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day doing a job, and still can't fully pay for their living. Right? And yet other people seem to be able to prosper well. And it says, the servant that is poor and needy, he needs the job. He's not going to turn the job down, even though you're paying him way below the proper wages. He's still going to come out and work. We do this all the time. Sad to say. Whether he be of thy brethren or of a stranger, you don't treat anybody this way that are in the land within your gates. All right, so if you have the authority, you have the ability, pay him a better salary. All right, don't oppress him. And also oppression could be, well, I'm going to work you, 20 hours a day. You get 4 hours to sleep and eat and come right back. That's oppression. I'm going to oppress you by child labor. I'm going to oppress you by, I want side benefits. And sometimes that happens unfortunately, with the women that they hire. I'm going to pay you some money, but I also want you to do other things for me, And we got to be careful. Don't oppress people because you have the authority to do so because you know they are needy. 15. At his day thou shalt give him his hire. Okay? Don't hold his money. Pay him his money on the day he works. Right? Neither shall the sun go down upon it. Don't wait until, well, I'll pay you tomorrow morning. No, you pay the person when he finishes work. Okay, and in those days that was very important because a lot of times people would work and they say, well, I'll pay you at the later on, and then the guy go to work the next day and everybody's gone. He got all the work out of you, and now he left, and he didn't have to pay you. No, pay the man his money while he's working. After when he's done. Look what it says. For he is poor and setteth his heart upon it. His heart is looking for it. I'm going to work. I'm going to put all my effort in, and I put my heart to get my money. And then at the end of the day, you say, well, I'm not going to pay you today. I'll pay you maybe tomorrow. Now he's disappointed. He can't go do what he wanted to do. Maybe he wanted to go to the market and buy some food for his wife or his children or just for himself. Now he can't do it. He had his heart set on it. You disappointed him. Lest he cry again against thee unto the Lord, and it be sin unto you. See, when the stranger and the poor and the person that is being taken advantage of cries to the Lord will take it from who? From you. So you don't want the Lord to come in and settle the debt. You want to do it out of kindness. Because if you the concept, it is more blessed to give than to receive. It's a principle. I'd rather take the short end of the stick and give it to the other person. I want to give the other person the benefit of the doubt. I want to give the other person, okay, I'm not sure how I want it, but you know what? All right. I'm going to lean more to let me help that person more so than helping myself. If we always are trying to, I want to see how it affects me rather than how it affects the other person. So what balances are you focusing on? What the other person is thinking and feeling, or what you're thinking and feeling? And what you want, or what they want? Once again, Jesus died for us because of his concern and love for us while we were what? Sinners. So we have to make sure that we don't fall into that kind of concept. Once again, all of this speaks about principles that we can apply, not just in how we deal with very direct things that are outlined here, but also apply to a variety of circumstances within your life. Let's keep going. The father shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the father. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. Now, when we were talking about them stealing people from other lands and making merchandise of that was in verse 7, right? And turning them into slaves. And we talked about what we recognize that because that's in today. Right? And then sometimes we want to say, well, those individuals that did that are dead and gone. But their children are still prospering from all that they did. And that is true. Right? But You don't kill them. Don't crucify them. Don't allow the children to suffer because of the sins of the father, and vice versa. Okay, so you say, well, but it's unfair. They got a way, big advantage, and they're still taking advantage of it, and that's correct. That is true. But that's when you cry out unto who? Unto the Lord. See, the descendants are not going to fix it. It's the Lord that's going to fix it. And so when you let the Lord know, and then the Lord comes in and he changes it around, and because they always were getting the biggest and the strongest and the most powerful slave, and they're like, oh, well, we're going to get this. And so you're looking at that, they're taking that and that individual and making him work the fields. And, well, now slavery's over, and, they're having children. And because their DNA continues to have, bigger and stronger individuals. Oh, well, look in today's society. Bigger and stronger individuals get scholarships to schools, play sports. See, so you wonder how, and I don't know this for a fact, God didn't show this to me, this is just me doing 2 plus 2, but you wonder sometimes how God looks at it and says, well, down the line, this individual... You say something, sir?
No, I'm sorry.
Down the line, the Lord looks and he knows, well, this individual's family is going to make millions because of his ability to do. Well, I like I said, that I'm not getting that. That's not a revelation from God. That's just me adding up, how things could be. But I certainly can see it as a possibility. Don't have to be an exact situation. But that's the point, though, that I'm trying to bring out. That God can turn things to your favor just like that. All right? And he can make it so that you can do regardless. So we don't always look for the vengeance. Plus, where then do we apply forgiveness? Where then do we apply grace and mercy? You have to, when you want to apply forgiveness, you have to have something that a person has done to you that needs forgiveness. How and when are you ever going to use your forgiveness card? When are you ever going to actually apply that? Or are you just going to keep it to yourself? I know I could forgive you, but I don't want to. It's not about a matter of want to. It's the ability to, well, here's a situation where I could actually apply forgiveness. Well, what are you going to do then? Are you going to not forgive? Are you going to hold grudges? Are you going to be mad? You're going to feel... And yes, do you have a right to feel mad? Yes, but that's what forgiveness is about. I have a right to be mad, but I choose not to. Once again, it's a sense of authority. I have the right to do, but I choose to go to the Lord. See, authority and right can play on both hands. You go, well, wait a minute. Why should I have... Well, you got the right because you were the one that was mistreated. Now the authority and the ability to forgive is in your hands. What are you going to do? I want to be mad and frustrated and upset that they ever did this. That's fine. But are you going to forgive? And that's something that we always got to try to reconcile. All right? And so you don't want to apply the concept of I'm going to have the children pay for the parents' sin. All right? Let's move on. Verse 17. Thou shalt not pervert judgment of a stranger, nor of the fatherless, nor of the widow's raiment to pledge. All right, so now, once again, what are we dealing with here? Individuals that seemingly don't have authority or power. Strangers, fatherless, widows. We're going to talk about those for the next couple of verses here. But don't pervert judgment. Don't just say, well, you know what? Let's take advantage of this individual. We'll lie in court. We'll say they did something. We'll take them. We'll turn them into merchandise. We'll put them into slavery. So it's the same now back to the other side. I have the ability to turn you into property and to turn you into merchandise and to use you for collateral. Don't do that. Why? Because they're people. And that's not what you're supposed to do.
They're gods.
All right? And so just because they are fatherless, which means you have no authority figure, they are a widow because you have no authority figure. They are a stranger. They have no credibility within the town, no other resources, because all their resources as being a stranger, they got on their back. They have nothing else really to pledge with or to bargain with. Don't mistreat them, because God's watching. And that's the concept that we got to have, okay? When can we do good for individual, and I don't really want anything back. I see you as a stranger, as a fatherless individual, as a widow. I'm going to help. Let's keep going. Verse 18. But thou shalt remember that thou was a bondsman in Egypt. And sometimes it's important to recognize that God allows you to go through things so you can identify. You can then say, you know what, I know what it's like. Sometimes I know what it's like to not be able to pay a bill. I know what it's like to be threatened with homelessness. I know what it's like to be disliked because of the person or the color of the skin or the nation that I was born to. I know what it's like. And so what God is trying to get us to see, sometimes you wonder, well, why did he allow them to be in that land? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but one of them certainly is, which is pointed out many times in Scripture, that he allowed that to happen, 400 years of slavery in Egypt, for a bunch of reasons. This is not the only one, but one reason is so that they would know and understand. And they will never forget 400 years of bondage. You know, American slavery wasn't 400 years. The Israelites were enslaved for 400 years. Right? And so that's one of those things that they can then identify and say, well, you know what, I should use that to not want to let anybody go through what we went through. But does that happen? No. Because we could be mistreated, and the minute we get an upper hand, we start the mistreatment ourselves. Unfortunately. Okay? So it said, remember, you were bond in Egypt. And the Lord thy God redeemed thee thence. Therefore I command thee to do this thing. Who redeemed you? God. And we got to remember that. Let's look at the next one. We're going to deal with one. You're going to hear this: stranger, fatherless, and widows. Look at this, 19. When thou cuttest down thy harvest in thy field, and have forgotten a sheaf in the field, thou shalt not go again and fetch it. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all the works of thy hand. Okay, so you down there, you cutting all the sheaves and everything, and you bundle everything up, and you count them. We got 25 here, and you start hauling them out. And when you get out, you recognize, oh, wait a minute, didn't we count 25? We only got 24. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to go back and get it. God says, no, leave it out there. It's a better blessing for you to leave it out there for the widow, the stranger, and the fatherless. You will get more out of that than trying to go back and get it. Because you're dealing with a situation where God says, if you help them, I will help you. Unfortunately, a lot of times we don't believe that. Why? Because we're looking at the world continuously through natural eyes. 2 plus 2 equals 4. And I have 25 sheaves, and I want all 25. If I leave one, that's a whole lot of work, a whole lot of planting, and a whole lot of doing things for no purpose. No, you do have a purpose. God's going to bless you. Can you recognize that there are times when God will and go over or around or under natural circumstances and bless you spiritually? But you have to have what kind of eyes to see it? Spiritual eyes. All right? So we don't walk in the natural, we walk in the spirit. All that we do is to allow the spirit to handle and to deal. See, if your spirit is leading, the natural man will feel uncomfortable from time to time, and the natural man will be following, but that means that the spirit is leading, and the natural man will always have his ups and downs. All right? But you cannot have the spiritual man following the natural man, because the natural man is going to feed what he gives himself, what he wants. I'm going to take advantage of everything I can take advantage of. I'm going to do everything I can do to my what? My benefit. But the spiritual man says, no, that won't help you as much as if you do everything according to the benefit as the Lord has done, has required. Yeah.
That's required faith.
It requires faith. Yes.
That, you know, and that's what we have to subscribe to, because there's, you know, been times that when we misplaced money or said, oh, I should have, you know, I think I've been cheated or whatever, and then, you know, we harper over it. Where is it? We looking for it and stuff like that, and, and instead of letting it go, and know that God has our back.
Right.
And God, that's the faith that we have to have as in God.
That's right. We do need to have. It does take faith. That's a very true statement. You got to have faith in God that God's going to work it out. And our feeling of being misled or cheated out or not getting what we deserve or what we work for, boy, that can break it. You're talking about getting an attitude.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
You spend more energy.
You spend a lot of energy trying to get even, and then just give it to God. Let God handle it. But once again, that takes what? It takes faith. Right? So when you're doing something and you're like, "Whoa, that's all you got out of that?" Well, I got what I needed. You know, that's okay. God's going to supply the rest. So you give opportunity and you open doors for God to bless. A lot of times, but we don't like doing that because I want to produce my own blessing.
And we don't want to be a blessing.
Or be a blessing to somebody else. When you're helping somebody else, remember you are operating as the hand of God. All right, but let's keep going. Verse 20. When thou beatest thine olive tree, and thou goest over the brook again, it shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. All right. So when you beat your apple tree, your olive tree, all right, it says, do not go over that same ground again. Don't walk over that same area. You beat it, you walked over it, and you picked up what you want. Don't say, well, let's walk around it again. Make sure we didn't leave any olives on the ground. No. Whatever you bypass, whatever you overlook in the first gleaning, let it stay there. Why? Because it's there for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. So what does it speak to? It speaks to, once again, do you have the ability to find situations where, you know what, I'll leave a little bit here for somebody else. I'm not going to try to exhaust it. I'm not going to just, totally take advantage of it. And in our day-to-day, it's very obvious how to do it back then, but in our day-to-day, there are multiple ways. And a lot of times, if you just ask God to show you, how can I do this? How can I leave something for strangers, widows, and fatherless? God will show you. And he'll let you see how you can actually be a blessing to somebody by giving them something that is yours. It belongs to you. Right? And there's no legal crime against going back and getting it. But it's spiritually a concept of what? I want everything that I have the authority to take. And that's what this whole chapter is about. I'm taking every advantage and every authority I can take for myself. Well, that's selfish. And you don't care about the other person. And it's not like how Jesus did. He stripped himself, came down to earth, died, and lived here in human form, and then died and was resurrected and brought to us salvation. It wasn't for his natural and his spiritual betterment of, well, this is just going to make God a better or greater God. Because God has always been great. He can't be any greater than what he is. He is always great. He's the Almighty. But what he did for us. It makes us better. It helps us. It gives us an opportunity to become the bride of Christ, the children of God. It gives us an opportunity to take the blessings he's left behind, that he's given. All right? And so that's the principle and the nature behind what we should be doing. All right? Let's finish this up now. Oh, wow, I'm past my time. I didn't even recognize it. Let me move on. 21. When thou gatherest the grapes of thy vineyard, thou shalt not glean it afterward. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. 22. And thou shalt remember that thou wert bondsman in the land of Egypt, wherefore I command thee to do these things. So he's saying, I'm commanding you to do these things because You know from your history what it's like to be mistreated because somebody else has authority over you. That is what happened to you and to your ancestors when you were in Egypt. You know what it's like to be manipulated. You know what it's like to be controlled. You know what it's like to be hungry because nobody of authority cares for you. So, when you see these things happening to somebody else, identify with it and be godlike and apply a remedy as opposed to a snatching of well, I'm sorry, this is all mine and I legally have the right to do this. And that is true. So one of the things that we can pull from this chapter is that sometimes it can take a what? A sacrifice. It's mine, but I choose to sacrifice it for what? For somebody else. Well, guess what happened? What are we celebrating today? The ultimate sacrifice that God did. God, everything that we have and everything that we see is God's. And he decided to what? Leave some gleanings for us. And then we have that hunger and we glean, we're following it because we have the hunger and thirst for righteousness, and we end up in the vineyard of the Lord, gleaning. And then what happens? You become connected to the Lord, and then he gives you his righteousness. And that's a very poetic way of stating it, but the key is God has left for us an opportunity to know him as God, Lord and Savior. Will we take what he has offered? He didn't have to offer it. He didn't owe it to us. He offers it. Do you want it? It's there for you. All you got to do is pick it up. And that's what the salvation is offered to us. It's there. All you got to do is what? Glean it. Pick it up. Utilize it. Take on the righteousness of Christ. And you will then be satisfied for eternity. That's what Jesus told the woman of the well. I have water to give you that if you drink of this water, you will not thirst again. All right, and so it's important to keep that in mind. All right, we're going to stop there. Not because I'm finished, just because I'm out of time. Any other comments or questions on what we talked about?